Hi there. I'm Joe Segrist. I'm the president of the Purple Martin Conservation Association, and I want to share a little bit with the Avistar audience today about our work and the adventures that we've gone on hunting for these birds, trying to find them in the Amazon, and just let you know what you can do to help these wonderful birds. So the name of my talk is Purple Martin, a bird uniting continents, and that's exactly what we're doing with our work. We're trying to find connections between purple martins in North America and those same birds and the people that they touch and interact with down in Brazil as well as part of their annual migration. During this talk, when I say we or my partners or our partners, this is who I'm usually going to mean. Our biggest partner is probably University of Manitoba, in particular Dr. Kevin Fraser there, as well as Mario Kohnhaft at IMPA in Manaus, and Erica Hingst-Zeher in Instituto Butantan, right there in Sao Paulo, where we would have been had there not be a pandemic right now. So also Disney Conservation Fund, we thank them for being the primary funder of this research, a great supporter of purple martin research in general. Okay, so purple martins, Andorinha Azul, is a beautiful swallow. It's the largest North American swallow. I think it's probably the largest South American swallow as well. The males, the adult males, are this all purple, blue, iridescent color. Not really purple, really actually blue. So the Portuguese name Andorinha Azul is actually a better name than the English name Purple Martin. Females and younger males and newly born hatchlings, fledglings, have this kind of a drab color, a cream, off-white color underneath. They don't have that sleek, dark color that the adult males have. That when you see one of those, you see an Andorinha that's all blue like that, then you know that you're seeing Purple Martin's Andorinha Azul. In North America, where these birds reproduce, there's 3 subspecies of purple martins, and they're separated by geography, but as well they have different breeding habitats. But by far the largest subspecies, Progne subis. Progne subis is the scientific name for purple martins, and subis, the extra subis, is the subspecies name. And they are that lavender part on the far right of the range map there. Basically everything east of the Rockies, from the Gulf of Mexico all the way up to where the boreal forest is in Canada. Long before European settlement to North America, purple martins were already strongly connected with indigenous groups. There were a few different Indian nations that took on this habit of putting up housing for purple martins. Basically, they would hang up these empty calabash gourds, used for carrying water or whatever, with holes in them, and purple martins would nest in them. And they slowly kind of became associated with humans and acclimated to people having these houses up for them. We're not exactly sure why that is. It might have been for insect control. These are aerial insectivores. They eat only flying insects, so that certainly would have been a benefit to our early farmers. They may have been like a watchdog. Purple martins will give an alarm call if they don't recognize somebody, but if the purple martins are used to you, they don't give that call. It could have been that they were like scarecrows. They scare off larger birds that are predators. They kind of mob up on them and get them to leave. Also, they may have been calendar. Purple martins are a bird that arrives in the spring every year in North America at the same time. One of the first signs of spring is when the purple martins show up. They kind of had this best of both worlds. Purple martins were nesting naturally in woodpecker holes. They're a secondary cavity nester, meaning that they don't make their own holes in trees. They use somebody else's holes. So a woodpecker would have a nest one year in a dead tree or snag, and then purple martins would move in after that in subsequent years. They would also nest sometimes in rocky cliff faces, holes, little cavities is where they would nest. But they also had this habit of nesting in human-provided structures. European settlers came along And they also took up this tradition of having purple martin houses. You can see there, they have a little house there back in the background on a pole with a little ladder going up there, and they all seem very proud of it. The boys back there are leaning up on it and showing it off. And then this little bird was brought over from England. It's the English house sparrow. It's spread all over North America, and it's all over South America. And the problem is for purple martins that they nest in the same secondary cavities that a purple martin would nest. But also, they're way more tenacious than the purple martins in trying to secure these cavities. So even though it's a much smaller bird than a purple martin, it's probably half its size, they will displace purple martins that are trying to nest in a natural cavity or an existing cavity somewhere, and they'll even kill adult and nestling purple martins. So those quickly spread all over. That was 1850-ish. And then in the late 1800s, this little guy, European starlings, were introduced in New York. It was a group of people who really loved William Shakespeare, and they had the bright idea to release all of the birds mentioned in the works of William Shakespeare and get them naturalized in North America. European starlings quickly spread across North America, and these also are secondary cavity nesters and also would displace purple martins. So a combination of those invasive species and habitat loss, there was wide stripping of forests as settlement moved west, and even today there's not a lot of forest left, and if somebody sees a dead tree, the first thing they want to do is cut it down. It's not something that they want to leave up for wildlife to nest in. So it's a combination of all these factors that have led to today all those eastern purple martins, east of the Rockies, that big lavender blob on the map that I showed, they have a complete reliance on humans for providing nesting habitat. They're unable to nest at all anywhere in natural cavities. They only reproduce in structures that humans put up for them. The type of housing that purple martins use that humans put up for them are artificial and natural gourds, so kind of that traditional Native American type housing that would have been put up. Also aluminum housing and wood housing, kind of this condominium or hotel type structures. They're a colonial bird, and they want to nest where there's other purple martins. So you'll see these poles in North America with lots of nest cavities, lots of purple martins living at each individual structure. Purple martins are a very important part of our ecosystem. They eat 262 billion insects every year, and that's in North America and when they're in South America. That's 250 billion insects that purple martins are helping to control, and that includes agricultural pests, pests to humans. But unfortunately, even despite the best efforts of humans to put up housing, according to the Breeding Bird Survey, every year for the last 50 years, we've had an average of 0.87% decline. So that's each year, almost 1% less every single year for the last 50 years. And that equates to the loss of 1/3 of all purple martins in that time. And here's a visual of the Breeding Bird Survey across North America. Basically what I want to show you with this is that it's not an even pattern of purple martin decline. All the red there is where purple martins are doing terribly. The blue is where they're doing fairly well. You can see it's kind of all over the place, right? There's some general trends, but it's a complex system that's going on that we need to figure out and better understand all the factors at play so we can help to reverse this trend. So we've got a pretty good idea what's going on in the breeding range in North America. These birds go to people's backyards. This is where they reproduce. They're easily studied. They get used to humans, but they spend more time away from North America than they do there. They actually migrate all the way down to primarily Brazil, primarily the Amazon rainforest, but very little is known about the ecology of the species down here. So I just want to take a step back at the way that humans study bird migration and how we get to the technology that we're currently using in this project. So I like to go all the way back, 350 BC, Aristotle thought that the European redstart transformed into the European robin. And the reason that they thought that is because the redstart migrates south and the robins move in. So, there's this migration, and they kind of have similar habits and similar behaviors and similar diets. So, this was migration going on, and they didn't really understand that, these birds are moving, and another bird is really just taking its place in the environment for a period of time. They actually thought it was one bird changing to another. And then we've got the Dark Ages that came along, and we lost some ground, I think, on understanding of science. This picture here is actually an etching from Swedish Archbishop Olaus Magnus, and this is from 1555 AD. It looks like those guys are fishing right there, but they're actually pulling a net out of the water, and it's full of swallows. And those are actually little birds drawn in there. And what they thought was that swallows in particular would sink to the bottom of wetlands and ponds and lakes during the winter and spend winter in the mud and then come back up in the spring. And clearly that's not the case, and it's kind of silly to think of it, but that's what they thought was happening. The birds were there hanging around the wetlands in the fall, and then they were gone. So the people just thought, well, they must have sunk to the bottom of the water. But about 100 years ago, organized bird banding came along as a technique to study birds. There's a lot you can do once you know the individual identities of specific birds, and you can track them over space if you have an identifier on them. Otherwise, it's just, oh, that's a purple martin, and here's a purple martin. This way that it's one with a particular number, and then you see it somewhere else. The PMCA, my organization, has a long-term banding program, and we banded over 20,000 purple martins at our research sites. And in general, since 1902, 539,000 and change purple martins have been banded across North America. And in that time, the number of band encounters outside of the US and Canada where purple martins reproduce is a whopping 39. So that's just a fraction of a percent. But even then, with that meager return on all that banding effort, you start to see where these birds were rediscovered. And the majority of these are birds that were found dead or sick, but still the birds got there somehow. And you can see that we've kind of got them on the route down to South America, and you've got quite a few in Brazil as well. So you get the idea that for the first time we're able to see all these purple martins are the ones that are going down here to Brazil. And you're able to draw this migratory connectivity map. So these are just a scattering of lines from where the birds were banded and where they were recovered. So you can see, they're obviously making this migration. And then in the 80s, something really cool happened, an experiment done in Brazil to look at purple martin migration.
A identificação da Andorinha Azul em São Paulo não foi feita por nenhum acadêmico ou cientista. O engenheiro químico e apaixonado por passarinhos, Douglas Fish, ainda era menino quando abateu uma andorinha azul para o trabalho de pintura do pai. Nos anos 80, com a ajuda dos pesquisadores Dino Visor e Jacques Viriat, constatou, era mesmo a Progne subis, a andorinha azul que vinha da América do Norte. Faltava confirmar a migração e a rota. Através da Associação de Preservação da Vida Selvagem, Douglas conseguiu uma autorização do governo americano para a microetiquetação. Com tinta especial, pintou mais de 300 mil andorinhas em 5 cidades paulistas. Cada grupo recebeu uma cor diferente, só visível com luz ultravioleta. O trabalho em conjunto com sociedades andorinheiras do Canadá e Estados Unidos foi um sucesso.
Com a pintura das andorinhas, 2 meses depois, foram recuperados nos Estados Unidos e Canadá 32 aves, o que provou definitivamente que elas migram. Agora, com a recuperação das penas que elas perderam nos dormitórios durante a volta, foi possível descrever com exatidão a rota migratória deles.
So that's, a really cool experiment. I don't think you'd probably be able to get that authorized now to spray paint, tens of thousands of birds. But again, this was something that interested parties were doing to better understand purple martin migration. It was done right in Brazil. So about 10 years ago or so, technology took a big leap with migration research. So in that little box right there, you can see a device called a light level geolocator. It's a little backpack we put on the birds. It's got a little stalk sticking out of the feathers there with a light sensor on it. And that looks at how long the day is and what time sunrise and sunset are. And from that, you can tell latitude and longitude, roughly to about a 200-mile radius of accuracy. And we're able to tell stories like this. This little bird right here was tagged all the way up in Alberta, and it left on its southward migration on August 24th, and it made it all the way down in about 2 weeks to the Gulf Coast. Jumped straight across the Gulf, spent about a month recovering from that quick trip in the Yucatan, and then finally, after that kind of refueling and recovery, made it down to its wintering grounds in the Amazon by November 7th. It left the Amazon on April 24th, took off like a rocket, made it all the way back in a week to the Yucatan Peninsula, and then in another 2 weeks was all the way back at its breeding ground up in Alberta. So it was away from its breeding ground for 263 days, traveled 22,000 kilometers. The migration in the spring was 21 days, and that gives it an average speed of about 600 kilometers per day. So this bird just cruised. It was in a hurry to get back. The birds rushed to get back so they can get the best selection of habitat for the breeding cavities. And we're able to take a lot of this data and put it together, and we can see areas of importance. You can see places where all the tracks converge and close in, and we can target those areas for habitat conservation. And we can put together educational outreach infographics like this. This is a series of birds from several different years migrating down from our research sites at our headquarters there in Pennsylvania. And you can see all the different routes that they come down. It's just kind of enthralling to watch. And then technology continued on getting miniaturized, and we got more accurate technology. This is a GPS tag, much more accurate than the light level geolocators. So we went from the accuracy of a few hundred kilometers to know within a couple meters where the bird is. So this fits on their back just like a backpack like the other ones. And as soon as we got that first bit of data, we were blown away. So you can see here the different locations where we put on these GPS tags: Texas, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, Ontario, Florida. And they all converged down, and we were blown away to see that they were overlapping in these little islands in Brazil. Sandbars in the river, little islands and archipelagos off the coast. We didn't expect that at all. Just incredible that the odds of this just being these few birds that we tagged were astronomical. So we knew that these places where those tags were overlapping were areas where there were a lot of birds from all across the breeding range coming down. So we had to get down there, and we wanted to see what this habitat was that the purple martins were using. It had been our dream to expand our research on the ground in Brazil. So we went to Manaus and hopped on a riverboat and headed up the river to some of those islands that we were seeing that the purple martins were using. And this is us standing foot on one of those islands up the Rio Negro from Manaus. White sand beach, really low. This is in the driest part of the dry season, so the water's at its lowest. During the wet season, the water would be much higher, and you can see back there kind of at the tree line where the water level would have been. There's kind of a look down the beach, and our river boat, the Mamie Denise, And this is a satellite shot of that particular island that we were on. That is a shot from the dry season, and this is from the wet season. So when the water is up in the river, only the tip tops of the trees were exposed. So you can see why a bird might want to use this as a landing area. A lot of isolation from predators on either side, and it's something that presumably would be kind of washed free of ground predators during the year as the waters came and went. But we also wanted to expand our research to a roost. So purple martins form these huge groups in North America before they migrate, tens, hundreds of thousands of birds all coming together at night, sleeping together, and then going out during the day. And there's a very famous one that was in Manaus at Petrobras refinery, right on the shore of the river there. And it was featured in The Life of Birds, so this is a little clip from The Life of Birds with David Attenborough.
Purple martins. Stay still and they will settle within inches of you. Why they come here in such numbers is a mystery. It can hardly be that they seek warmth in this muggy tropical atmosphere of central Brazil. They don't feed here. Perhaps it's because there are fewer hawks around to harry them than in the forest. But whatever the reason, come they do.
So you can see there tens of thousands of purple martins, all on this refinery. Obviously, you can get close to them. David Attenborough was standing right in the middle of them. We had big dreams to do research there, capture the birds, do measurements, put tags on them, what have you. But when we got there, they told us they weren't here anymore. They wouldn't give us any details on what might have happened. They just said they're not here. They haven't been here for a while. We had to see for ourselves. They wouldn't let us, on the property. It's highly secured. It's a refinery. But we needed to see for ourselves. We thought maybe they just didn't want us snooping around. So we hired a boat to take us up the river and park us out front of the river so we could watch at sunset to see if the birds showed up. So that's what we did. And in the rainforest, it rains a lot. So it was getting ready to storm. But you can see here the refinery up on the hill. We found a place across the river to sit. So when we got there, parked on the island, the rains came. It just let loose. You couldn't even see across the river. So we rolled down the sides of the boat there, and we were all just peeking our binoculars out. And I thought for sure we were going to get arrested, because if you'll notice in that video of us driving by, there's military boats there. There's a military base in Manaus. And, of course, petroleum refineries are well secured. So how suspicious do these gringos look across from the river just with binoculars poking out? I thought for sure we were going to jail that night. But luckily we didn't. Luckily the skies cleared up right at sunset. But unfortunately the purple martins didn't show up. They really were gone, and we didn't know where they were. So we went back home without any birds to show for it, but we had to figure out what was going on, and we needed to find those birds. We really wanted to learn more about what purple martins are doing in Brazil. So we formed a group with partners in Brazil and North America called the International Purple Martin Working Group. University of Manitoba, Butantan, IMPA that we mentioned earlier, Disney, Northern Arizona University, McGill are some of our newer additions to the working group. We needed to join forces to get a better understanding of what's going on. Formed a project called Projeto Andorinha Azul, started and spearheaded by folks at Butantan. And you may have been to our website, andorinhaazul.org, or participated in our social media. We formed a citizen science project to try and find not only the roost of purple martins in Manaus area, but also in all of Brazil. So using social media and other means, we contacted people and we got reports on where purple martins were roosting in Brazil. We continue to gather GPS data. You can see here kind of a group of GPS tracks from North America, and we looked very closely at where they were down in Brazil to see if any of them were using a roost nearby Manaus or one that we could easily investigate. And we had a potential roost here. This is the little island upriver from Manaus on the Rio Negro. We drove right by this island on our previous trip, and this is it in the dry season. This is it in the wet season. Looks a lot like the other habitat, right? And you could see there we had 2 birds tagged, and this is them spending the night there, and then the spokes coming off, or where it went off to feed during the day and then came back. So they were coming back over and over overnight to rest on that island. So we came back to Brazil, but we wanted to find roosts all over the place. So we did a lot of searching in southern Brazil and Sao Paulo state. This is us heading through farmland and agricultural land looking for purple martin roosts where people mentioned they might be. We looked in the rainforest areas. We looked in town squares where purple martins traditionally have been reported to roost, especially in southern Brazil. We were above the rainforest, but we didn't find a roost that trip either. But we did have another mission, and that was to put up receiver stations of a research network called the MODIS network. And this little video explains kind of what this technology is.
The MODIS Wildlife Tracking System uses tiny tracking devices and a network of hundreds of receiving stations strategically located throughout the Western Hemisphere. MODIS is yielding spectacular discoveries. Now, researchers can safely track bird movements over vast distances and with incredible detail to pinpoint the greatest threats to vulnerable species.
So we had big plans to use MODIS to study purple martins. Of course, we needed to find them on the ground, but we had a good idea that they were still around Manaus somewhere. So we put up receiver stations on that particular trip. This was 2018, I believe. This is one of the receiver stations going up on a observation tower over the rainforest north of Manaus. That's it on the left there, and then on the right is another one, and this one is actually on the shores of the Rio Negro, near where that island was. We knew some purple martins were using at one point with those GPS points. We didn't see them there, but they don't roost there the whole time they're in Brazil. So we thought, well, maybe our timing was just off. So we continued to have people check on the area and do research and try and find out where the martins might be. But we had to get back to North America. But we did get our stations up there. This is a map of all the different MODIS stations in North America, South America, Europe. You can see our 2 little yellow dots there right in the heart of the Amazon. We were really excited to be part of that because this is a great technology, not only for studying birds, but you can also use it to study insects. You can actually have tags small enough to go on insects that are then monitored by the network of antennas. But we waited and waited and waited. We needed that roost so we could go back and we could put some of these MODIS tags out. And I was ready to go with the drop of a hat. And then finally, Mario sent us a message. Holy bleep, we've seen it. It's much more spectacular than we imagined. And Pamela, one of our researchers there, she said, I have no words. So I had to go. I had tags. We had already bought the tags to put on birds. So I dropped everything and went back down to Brazil. And it was the wet season, so the water was up. So Rio Negro, dark water, and we headed through flooded forest to get to where these purple martins were roosting. And this is it. This is the island that we found them on. It's right up, actually near that other island that we had the GPS points on. We spoke to the locals there, and they said the martins used to use that island that we had the tracking tags that were showing, but for some reason they moved to this island. So this is actually a new island that they were on. But we were thrilled, and we were finally able to get out there and do some research on these birds. We had found where all these birds went to from the Petrobras refinery. And it's spectacular. Our estimates were somewhere between 200 and 300,000, and they all show up right at night. They fill the skies. They just rain down all together, and then the ones who come in later just skim along the water's edge like that. Just absolutely incredible to witness. If you are ever up in the Manaus area, witness it for yourself. It's incredible. And we'll be locating more purple martin roosts, hopefully with your help, all across Brazil. The videos don't ever really do it justice, but this picture is actually the closest thing that we've had to really do justice to what it looks like. Just birds, filling the sky. It's incredible. Levels upon levels, layers on layers of purple martins. You look up into the sky, and then your eye kind of focuses at a farther distance, and you see that that's full of purple martins too. And then you look a little farther, and you can see the specks, and it's even more. It's just absolutely incredible how many of these birds are there. And really the most incredible thing that I think is that each one of those birds, of those hundreds of thousands, are ones that hatched in somebody's backyard in North America. They're so loved in North America that people put up these houses for them, and each one of these birds came from somebody's house that cared enough to put the habitat up for them. We finally had birds in hand. We were able to do our field work, put out the Modus tags. Just wonderful to be able to do that. And incredibly, we captured a banded bird. This particular bird right here was banded in North America, in Connecticut, which is along the in New England, kind of near New York. And we were just blown away that happened. I mentioned earlier how many purple martins were banded total, and we only had 49 of them that were recovered. And luckily now, 40. We were thrilled to be able to raise that number by one. Just absolutely incredible to be a part of, to expand this research in Brazil. And the way that we were able to do that is through citizen scientists. And we hope that the viewers out there watching along here, participating in Avistar, are able to help. Keep your eye out for purple martins. If you see some, let us know via our social media or andorinhaazul.org. We want to expand our research, not just in the Manaus area, but there are purple martins all over the Amazon and into southern Brazil as well. So we want to find where they are and expand our research all across the country. I appreciate you guys sticking around and listening to my talk. I look forward to answering questions here in a minute.